For enterprise architecture, one of our core concerns is how our architecture is going to support design for failure, the fact that things are going to fail. One of my real concerns about the way that a lot of enterprise architecture is done at present is that it seems to design only for a happy path where everything's going to work. This is particularly important if we are over-reliant on IT. We need to understand what are our processes for business continuity and disaster recovery when the IT goes down. The first one is we need to identify at least the knowable sources of failure. But remember also that unknown unknowns always exist. A simple example would be what happens when your IT goes 10 feet underwater, which is what happened in New York in Hurricane Sandy. What happens when you get a flood? What happens when you get a lightning strike that knocks out the local controller? What are the impacts? How are you going to prioritize the probability of a risk versus the severity of the impact? These are trade-offs that we need to make. Responding to something where it doesn't matter if it isn't fixed for a day or two is very, very different from the complexity and cost of something that has to keep going under all circumstances or be up in a second or two at most. We also need a lot of, particularly in a business architecture space, we need to think very carefully about fungibility of services, about how we can substitute one type of service for another and as seamlessly as possible. A simple example here is that if your IT system goes down, you're likely to use a manual process. In the local Starbucks, for example, the credit machine, the cash machine was out of action, the credit tills, but it could record. They had a cash book, a manual cash book, where they wrote entries in to record all of the sales of the day. That meant that you not only had to have the cash book to hand, but also the mechanisms to capture the information that you put in that book and put them back into the ordinary IT system later when the system's back up. What are the overrides that you're going to need to do for that? So firstly, you've got the fungibility of services, that we're able to replace an IT system with a manual system. So we need to model it as if it's an application, not as if it's something completely different at a completely different layer of the architecture. They have to be considered to be symmetrical, the same thing. We've also got to look at how we're going to recover from that situation. How are we going to build the continuity in there? So in our architecture, we need to design for failure rather than simply assume that it won't happen.